Well, hello there. Hey, it's Joseph Lahiff with Whitewater Projects, and I'm glad to have you here today on this webinar. I'm excited to be sharing just some basics. Make sure that I'm on. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, please press the little raise my hand button on your console there. If you can hear me, please let me know. Awesome. Thank you, folks, for letting me know. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And all right, I'm going to get us started here. Working with a couple of different clients, and they're folks that are kind of starting off or restarting off their Scrum practices. And so I'm immersed at the moment in teaching kind of these basics of the process and the schedule, and when do you do what, and all these different things. Because to me, having done this for a number of years, this whole Scrum thing is very smooth and very easy to, I know when all these things happen, but a lot of people don't. And so I wanted to do this quick webinar here today to let you know the process that as I teach it, when I teach folks how to do Scrum and Scaled Scrum. We'll talk a little bit about some Scaled Scrum. And what are the events and what goes on when you're doing that kind of thing. So if you have questions, please type them into the questions box. Happy to answer any questions that you have as we go through, because that's the point of this, right? To make sure you understand it. And you all have the benefit of being here live with me on the phone, so you can ask the questions. The folks who are watching this later, hi folks who are watching it later or listening to the rebroadcast, you don't have the opportunity. I'm sorry. You'll have to join us on the next webinar. So let's start talking a little bit about some of the Scrum events. To do that, I want to just start off with what is the Scrum process? How does Scrum generally work? Scrum is an iterative and incremental approach to delivering products, frequently used in software development products. But it can be used for other things as well. It can be used for hardware. The first time Scrum was ever used as a term to define a new product development process, it was in 1986, so it was a long time ago. And the term was used to define how these couple of different companies were developing, let's see, there was a printer in 86, so probably a dot matrix printer back in the day. A printer, a 35mm camera lens, this crazy idea called a personal computer. I think there was a copier, because Xerox was one of the companies. So they were all hardware. There was no software, and they were using this term Scrum because they were doing this little bit by little bit and overlapping all of the phases of development as we traditionally know them, the initiation, planning, execution, controlling, and closing processes that we're used to in project management world. They were doing kind of all together, and that's how they called it. So Scrum can be used for all kinds of different things. It just depends on how you implement it. But it all starts with a product owner. Now, product owner is one of the 3 roles that are in Scrum. The product owner is essentially a customer proxy. They are there to represent the needs and interests of the customer. If you were using XP, which works very beautifully with the Scrum process, Scrum it provides a product delivery framework, and XP provides the development practices and framework for that. So they marry very nicely. If you are using XP, they don't have a product owner. They have the actual customer sit with them. So if you're doing XP, they really want you to have the real customer sitting with you. So either one, you have somebody who's representing the interests of the customer sitting here with you and talking about the product. They create what is known as a backlog, the product backlog. It consists of a number of customer stories. Those stories talk about the different features and functions that the customer wants to have in this new product and the product owner's belief about that. interesting side note. I wrote an article recently for InfoQ.com. If you go to InfoQ.com and look up my name, Joseph Flahiff, or look up your story cards are limiting your agility. I proposed a change to the story card format in this article, and lots of people have agreed with me. The problem with the story card format as it currently exists is we say that the standard format says, as some kind of user, I would like some feature or function so that what's my benefit? Okay, so it's, as a user of the library, I would like to be able to check out a book within 25 seconds so that I can quickly get on my way to reading it, right? Problem is, most of the time in new product development, especially for consumer-driven new product development, we don't know what they want, right? We're making a good guess at it, but we really don't know what they want. So, sorry, I'm going to try and look at questions while I'm talking. So, if we don't know what they want, then how come we're saying as a I would like? Rather, we should say, we believe X customer would like to have Y feature or function. And to prove this hypothesis, or to disprove this hypothesis, to confirm this, we are going to do something. Now, that something may be developing a website, or some kind of software, or some new canister or product or something. But it also may be doing something else to validate that you're actually accurate in your assumptions of what your customer needs. You may be completely off the mark. A great example from the Lean Startup sites in the book, The Lean Startup, Eric Ries cites it, is Groupon. Groupon started out they were trying to build, the folks that now run Groupon were trying to build a product that was going to be kind of a central clearinghouse for people who were trying to do not-for-profit fundraising. And they ended up doing Groupon. So go figure, right? What they did was they checked it out, and they did some testing. They validated their assumptions, and they found out they were wrong, and they pivoted to where the market was with what they were offering. And now you have Groupon and making billions of dollars. Enough of that story. You have a customer, you have a product owner who's representing the customer. You have this backlog of stories that are developed by the product owner. The product owner is responsible for that. Then you have a team of people. This team of people are your development for your new product. Now, that doesn't mean it's just some engineer developer people. This is people who do testing and QA. This is people who do UI or user experience or user interface design. This is your people who do development. This is architects. This is everybody who has their hands in the pie, right, that are working on it. It's not the managers or the product owner. They're not that group of people. These are the actual people who are doing stuff to make this happen, okay? That group of people looks at the prioritized list that this product owner has come up with, this list right here, this list right here, and looks at that and says, okay, these are the things that we think we can get done within the time frame that we've selected as our iteration length or our sprint length. So they pull a few of those things out of the backlog, and they call those the iteration or the sprint backlog. From the sprint backlog, then, you have a time box where they will have a daily stand-up or the daily Scrum meeting, where they'll be coordinating with each other and things. We'll talk about all these things in just a few minutes. They go through the process of creating all the tasks for that piece of work, and then they deliver that product completed at the end of the sprint to the customer, who is wildly ecstatic about the product they're receiving, but then provides additional to the product owner, who then puts information into the backlog to adapt to the questions and things that they had, or the concerns that they wanted modifications, and then the process all happens again. Now, this particular slide is one I use when I'm doing live presentations, so the animation, there's been some animation on it, so I'll just wait a second. The animation doesn't come through well on GoToWebinar, but so that is the fundamentals of the flow of the Scrum process. Now, I'm seeing a couple of questions. Let me take a second to address those. Any hints on dealing with projects rolling under hard fixed scope and fixed time contracts, i.e. bad things happen if the product is not delivered under these constraints? Yes, I can talk with you about that in just a second. Sometimes it requires much effort to make them really ready to finish without being blocked, e.g. imagine some integration with customers' internal systems is needed, yes. Even if requirements are clear from a business point of view, technical details may need heavy involvement of customer experts. Should the team commit to working on such stories, or stories should be groomed? Yeah. We'll talk about that in just a minute. You probably would want to do what's known as a spike on the things that are too vague. How to deal with situations when the customer is unwilling to participate in sprint reviews. Oh, man. How to deal with it when customer is unwilling to participate in sprint reviews. So kind of off topic, but it happens. It happens sometimes when you're first starting out with a team. It would be incumbent upon you as the person who's trying to get Scrum done to have them at least come to one. At least come to one demo. Come to the first one. And then we'll see if in a couple weeks you want to come to the next one. Chances are, actually, when they come and see, hot dang, in 2 weeks you got that done? Yeah, I want to see what's going on. They will want to see it as it's coming through. The problem, though, I think goes deeper than what you're saying here. Is it that your customer, external customer, is unwilling to participate in the sprint reviews, or your product owner is unwilling to participate in the sprint reviews? If it is, that's a deeper problem that your organization is fundamentally broken because your product owner is not giving the value to this effort, to the project, and that needs to be addressed right away because you cannot succeed without their heavy involvement. And I would be very forceful in my conversations with the product owner about that, saying, we will not succeed if you do not participate on a daily basis with this team. So, that's where that is. All right. I'm going to keep going. I hope that answered your questions, and we'll deal with some of these other questions about fixed scope and about the grooming in just a minute. Okay, so what does this look like on a day-to-day basis, right? What does this look like on a calendar? Well, here we have a 2-week sprint. I like 2-week sprints myself, and I believe most instructors these days, people who are coaches and such, prefer to have 2-week sprints. The reason I like 2-week sprints is that it's hard to do, right? Which seems odd, but it's hard to do, and so it forces you to focus, which is one of the core Scrum values, which is focus. It forces you to focus on delivering one thing at a time and to focus on delivering fast. It does not give you a whole lot of time for things to go sideways and get messed up, or they just go completely sideways fast, right? And that's an important and good thing to have happen. You want to fail fast. If you're going to fail fast, learn and move on, right? Don't spend a lot of time slowly sinking into Sheol. You don't want to go there. just take it fast and get it over with. Okay, so here is your typical sprint. It's a 2-week sprint, days 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Notice there are no weekends. We won't work weekends. Sorry, don't work weekends. We work a good, solid 8-hour day, but we're not going to push our team to burnout. We want to have sustainable pace. So we have here a 10-day sprint. The very first thing that happens in the sprint is sprint planning. Sprint planning is when you plan out the work that you're going to do in the sprint. We'll go into more detail in a minute. It's where you figure out whether, how much work of that you initially said, yeah, we think we can take this on, you really can take on, and then you commit to that, or you forecast whether you can get that work done or not. At the end of the sprint, you do a demo of the completed stories from that sprint. And then you do a retrospective. All the while in the middle, you're doing a daily scrum. That's really it. Those are the basic meetings and events that happen during a typical Scrum cycle. Now, there's a couple of other things to make things smoother, right? In this, you would have a 15-minute daily stand-up, those daily scrums. Your sprint planning would probably be a couple of hours, at least a couple of hours. Your demo would be probably half an hour, 45 minutes. And your retrospective would probably be an hour or maybe hour and a half or 2. We'll see. It depends on how well things went and how poorly they went. Now, let's take this another step further to make it more efficient at the sprint planning time. Let's look at 2 sprints worth of time. So we've got the what is that, magenta and blue sprints. And we're sprinting along here in week 1 of the magenta sprint here, okay? And we come up on the 3rd and 8th days. I like to do something that I call story time. And I know a lot of other folks have started doing it as well. And I made up the name story time. I don't know, whatever. You can call it what you want, but basically what it is a time, about an hour usually, where the product owner and BAs and the team, if you have BAs, all get together and discuss the stories that are currently the next ones up on the list. So the product owner has been prioritizing the backlog and keeping that up to date. And so at story time, you are looking at the very next one that's up, right? And you're having a Q&A session well in advance of starting your sprint planning. What that does is it gets it into the back of the mind of your development team, and so it'll just percolate back there, and then they've got some context of the greater project, what's going on in the whole thing, what's coming next. People like to know what's coming next. But it also gives them time to be thinking about, that's an interesting dilemma, that story that's coming up. I wonder how we'll solve that. And it gives them time to percolate and ruminate on those problems so that they've got some idea when they get to sprint planning of how they might attack it. And it makes sprint planning go a lot, A, more quickly, and B, more accurately. Because if you do sprint planning like we had in the previous slide, where it's all in one day, basically you're just trying to figure it out on the fly. How am I going to do this? Might be okay for simple systems, but if you're doing something really complicated, if you have interactions with legacy systems, if you've got lots of interactions between multiple platforms, you need to do a little bit of thinking ahead of time. And I am not saying a lot of thinking. I'm not saying do a detailed design or write me a spec. I'm saying at this meeting you have a conversation about it. And you talk through what that next story is. It's a time for folks to have their questions answered and to figure out what this story is all about. Okay? Each of those leads towards the blue side of the sprint. So you can see these blue story times feed the blue sprint, though they're happening during the magenta sprint time frame. Look over here and see if there's more questions. Not at the moment. And backlog grooming, which is done by the product owner, is done all the time, right? People say, when does the backlog grooming session happen? It's like, there's no backlog grooming session. You can decide to have one if you want to, right? Where if you have a team of product owners, or if you have product owners and BAs, business analysts that have to come together and discuss it, that's great. Go ahead and do that, but it's not required in Scrum's format for anybody. So backlog grooming just happens all along. So sprint planning sessions. What the heck do you do in a sprint planning session? Well, there's, 5 different kind of phases that you go to particularly in scaled sprint planning. If you are doing just one team agile, or you're doing smaller scaled agile, then you can do, let me draw you the picture here. You can do this, the PO State of the Union, tasking, and confirming. All right? You don't have to do these other things in the middle. And it can go faster for you. So what happens during this? Well, there's another slide here that I have that has a lot of words on it. I'll leave it up. So it may come through and you may be able to see it. It's the same picture as the last one. It's just all the little things that happen in each of these stages. The first thing is the product owner gives a State of the Union. Where are we at, right? This is where the backlog is. These new things have become higher priority because we got this particular customer feedback. Hey, these are the adoption metrics, right? That the product's being adopted well, or we are seeing from our feedback from adoption that people really would like this instead of that, and that's why things have changed. Here's, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, here's where the product is going, okay? That's the State of the Union. The new things that you did last sprint are doing really good, and people are excited about it, right? Excited to get those launched. The next thing that happens, so they're giving you the State of the Union. Here's what's important to us. The next thing that happens is the team huddles. And each of the teams, so you've got multiple teams here in Scaled Agile. You've got maybe 4 or 5 different teams. These teams huddle and talk amongst themselves and say, okay, he just gave us a State of the Union. I think these stories that we selected make sense. Do they still make sense to everybody here? Okay, yeah, they do. Okay. 5 minutes maybe. Probably not much more than that, unless the State of the Union went sideways to what you had done at story time just before. In which case you might say, wow, we don't really know which stories, or we're going to have to swap out some stories, and that means we're going to have to take some more time understanding it. But then in the team huddle, the team selects a spokesperson. Maybe it's your lead developer, maybe it's your scrum master. It doesn't really matter who does it. That then comes to the little blue teal colored space here. Whoa, where did my mouse go? My mouse completely disappeared on me, folks. There it is. Okay, it came back. I'm going to go back to this. All right. Then you come to the cross-team share time. In the cross-team sharing time, the teams are all sitting in the same room. They turn back around to the middle. You may have people who are remote, and so you've got them on conference call, preferably video conference call. Preferably you flew them in for this, but can't always happen. Worked on one particular project where every other sprint we flew the people in. So and on the off sprints they were on the conference call, video conference. So it worked out really well. That was probably before the stock market crashed and we had more money going on in that particular company. But it was great. We were able to actually see face-to-face most everybody once a month. So you turn back around, and each team has their spokesperson share the stories that they're working on for that sprint. I'm going to be working on this, and we're going to be developing these APIs, and we'll be doing this user interface piece, blah, 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 blah. And they note any known interdependencies with other teams, right? So, oh yeah, and I know that you, web apps team, are going to have to be developing your side of the API, right? Or you're going to have to give us the contract for the API so we know what's going on. That interdependency then is able to be followed up on during the sprint, and you're able to know who you're working with, right? Now I know that there's an interdependency. They state the known ones, but there's also going to be people who go, oh yeah, and over here in team number 4, who you didn't identify a interdependency with, we also are planning on working in that, so we'll need to talk, okay? Okay, done. Now you have a group understanding of what the heck the product is that we're creating and how we can interact with each other. And you may follow that up with different types of doing Scrum of Scrums or something like that, but I'm not going to go into that here. This is a preliminary, right? This is not necessarily what you are fully going to forecast for your sprint. It is a preliminary forecast because you haven't done the detailed breakout to know that you have the capacity to do all of these tasks. This is just a quick preliminary. This should take 20 minutes if you had 5 teams. That's less than 5 minutes a team, right? If you had 4 teams, you had 5 minutes per team, 20 minutes. So yeah, it's probably about that. 5 minutes is plenty of time to say, these are the stories I'm working on, and I see interdependencies here. Don't go discussing it. This is not the time for that. This is the time for identification and communication, right? Not for problem solving. After you're done with that, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either adjourn the all-group meeting, or you can continue to meet in your small pods in the same room where you're at. I tend to like to do it in that second way, but the other one works as well. You can just adjourn, and then teams will go away, and as a team, they will do the tasking, right? So they'll take the stories that they had forecasted for this sprint and develop a list of tasks that they expect to do to execute these stories. They will estimate the general amount of time that they think it's going to take. People have a hard time estimating time. However, I think you can do a pretty good job of estimating things that are within the next 2 weeks. If I'm asking you to estimate the time that something's going to take 6 months from now, yeah, you can argue. But really, within a week or 2 weeks, you can get a pretty good justification of how big that's going to be. And that's really what we're looking for, is just kind of a general estimate of where we're at so that we can start working and start to see how well we're going. You will miss things. That's a fact. You will miss things. And that's okay. You just add them in later. So let's see. So where we are. We're at tracking. They separate. It can take a long time, or it can be very quick. So I have worked with teams where they had to create. They really wanted to create the very detailed tasks of exactly what was going to be created for. What were the tasks I have to build this DLL, and I have to write into this, make this library, and I have to create this table, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, wow, that's a lot of detail. If your stories are small enough, and they should be small enough that they can reach your definition of done with one person, whether it's one person doing dev and handing it to one person doing QA, or one person doing dev and handing it to another dev who does QA, whatever. One person sequentially doing it within about half of your sprint, because you won't have just one person working on it. You'll swarm on it, so it'll get done faster than that. If your stories are about that size, then your tasks can actually be more generic, because the story itself is small enough that you don't have a whole lot of differentiated tasking. Anyway, that is all up to the team and how detailed they want to get with it. I tend to encourage people to be more general, to try and make it a high-level thing so that you're not spending a whole lot of time in this process getting really detailed. It becomes tedious, and people, after a while, hate it. Where if you can go, okay, you know what? We have to do a preliminary, like an outline of this, and if you're doing, we have to do a wireframe, and then we have to do the CSS, and then we have to do the HTML, or whatever we do. I don't know. These are the little things that I do just about every time I do a story. So I'm going to, kind of have these general ones for each story I do, and they are small enough that I can do each one of those in a day, and the story is going to get done within half of the sprint, so we're good. So I may have slipped something in there. Those tasks that you create should be one person's work for one day or less. The reason for that is very simple. You want to be able to see things move during the sprint to know whether or not you're making progress. If a task is 3 days worth of work, how long is it before the team knows that the task is behind, right? That it's going to take longer than you expected it to. Well, if a task is 3 days long, you don't know until the 4th day. Well, in a 2-week sprint, that doesn't give you a whole lot of time to correct anything or to help that person out or whatever. If the work is done within 1 day, right, if it's small enough that it should be done in 1 day, and I look up on the board and I see that card's been here for 2 days, right? It's the next morning, we're here for our daily stand-up, and the card hasn't moved. What's wrong? Need any help? What can we do to help you move that card? Because, we're trying to keep moving forward. It's not an accusation of that you're doing something wrong. It's that you ran into a roadblock, ran into a bump in the road. Let's address it. So one person, less than 1 day for each task. And then at the end of this time, you confirm, yes, those forecasted stories are the ones that we will be doing this sprint. Or, yeah, we thought we were going to be able to, but because of our capacity, and in here at some point you have addressed how much capacity you have, right? Because you always want to make sure that you're taking into account the fact that, Sanjeev is taking 3 weeks of vacation right in the middle of this sprint. We normally have him, but we don't. Dang, right? Or, so-and-so is going on a field trip with their kid, and they're going to be gone for a day. Or, they're going on an anniversary, they'll be out for 2 days. These things need to be accounted for so that when you're planning how much work you're going to get done, you are planning it with the right capacity, right? Things change sprint to sprint, so you need to always be doing that. And that's usually done in this tasking time frame. So you do that capacity planning in the tasking time frame. All right, so here we're going to start walking through some of the individual events. Backlog grooming. Who does that? Well, the product owner or owners do that. If you have several, you may have a complex product that has, a head product owner and then multiple line product owners that own different parts of it. So they would have to meet together to do that. In that time frame, they are looking at the stories that are in the backlog. They're making sure that those stories clearly and accurately reflect what they think. They're making sure that it includes defects, right? So any defects that escaped the last sprint are put into the backlog and prioritized with everything else. Some people might not want to do that. I believe that is a good practice. Because the fact of the matter is, to your product owner, some defects might not be worth addressing, right? It might not be worth their time to address one of these particular defects. And to most developers that I've worked with, they want to fix every defect, every single one. But product owners have a different view sometimes. So they prioritize the defects into the backlog as much as possible. Review and prioritize the entire backlog, doing it continuously, wanting to make sure that you have a clear backlog that accurately reflects where they think we're headed with this whole product as we go through. Story time. I talked a bit about story time earlier. At this event, you have the product owners, and if you have BAs, you have BAs there, and you have the entire Scrum team. Does it matter if QA is there? Yes, it does. They are part of the Scrum team. Does it matter if architecture is there? Yes, they are part of the Scrum team. So everybody who has that input into this, it needs to be in here, because what you're doing in this time is you're refining your understanding of the next stories that are in the queue, right? So that you understand and can quickly at sprint planning be able to define what the tasks are associated with it. And so you have a clear understanding of it. You may end up with some things that you're not really sure what that is, and it's so unclear that you need to do what's called a spike. That's down here to bullet number 5. Under what? It says identify spike stories that are too vague. A spike is just taking a sprint and a certain amount of capacity, and the output, usually the output from a sprint is working software. The output from a spike, which is work done during a sprint, is nothing more than greater understanding. But what you're doing is time boxing that R&D. So you're doing some R&D on trying to figure out what it is and that this is, and then refining that down. Other things that you do during this time is you want to make sure that you split any stories that are too large, right? It's like, whoa, that one's really big. We need to make sure that it's small enough that we can actually address it. This should happen probably a couple of times during the sprint, but don't do it too often. Start wasting a bunch of time and people will begin to hate the whole process. So be careful that you don't overuse the story time. Once a week is probably plenty. What you get out of it is deeper understanding and the ability to write out the tasks quickly. You also need to be writing your acceptance criteria during this time, if you haven't done any before time. Sometimes folks will do that during the backlog grooming. The product owner will, start to flesh out what their acceptance criteria would be, like given, when, then kinds of statements. Very clear, though. We want to have those acceptance criteria very, very clear. Okay. In a situation with, this is a question that someone has sent in a situation with geographically remote customer, how does the product owner balance to be both available to the team and aware of the customer's needs, should be close to the customer? Well, obviously, being geographically separated at any time is hard. It's just hard, but it's also a fact of life. So we need to just understand that it's going to make it more difficult than if you were right in hand, but we have to work with it. So depending on how geographically remote, and the way I'm reading this is the product owner, this is the situation with a geographically remote customer. So the product owner is close, but the customer is remote. In that case, you would want to be, the product owner would want to be in constant communication with some kind of customer base, depending on what kind of customers that you were talking about. If it was a consumer product or a B2B product, or they're going to be different approaches. If it's a B2B, you can fly over there and visit for a while, and then fly back, and then you're able to share with the product team what's going on and how the customer feels about it. If it's a B2C, business to consumer, then you would be looking at things like buying trends and maybe doing focus groups remotely, right? So you don't have to actually be there interviewing them to get the feedback, but questionnaires and things like that. The same kinds of techniques that you use when a B2C is close, you just would do them remotely, because the metrics are still going to be the same. I hope that was helpful. The daily stand-up. It's a really simple meeting, but it is elusively more complicated than it sounds. You have two groups of people who attend this. You have active members and passive members. So the active members are the members of the Scrum team, dev, UX, UA, QA, test, whoever you have involved with hands-on product, right? Then you have the passive members who are the product owners or BAs, other folks, maybe managers from dev, QA, test, UX folks. But I call them passive because it is not their meeting. And they are there as a resource to be called upon, not as a manager, leader to be directing the work, right? This, under what here? It says, this is a team coordination meeting, not a status meeting. So product owners and managers, et cetera, should not come to this meeting expecting to obtain a status. The status they can get from looking at the burn down, from looking at the tasks moving across the Scrum board. They can get from those artifacts, right? Not from bugging the team. That's why we use those artifacts, because it makes it easy to very clearly see, yep, looks like those things are moving. The 3 questions are asked in this. The 3 questions are, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to work on today that people would care about? And what are your roadblocks? I mean, you don't need to tell me that if you're working on something that doesn't affect anybody, but make sure that you're communicating what you're working on and what you're going to do tomorrow, what you did yesterday and what you're going to do today. And roadblocks. It's really important that people identify roadblocks, and this is where the Scrum value of courage comes out, right? It's kind of tough sometimes to say, you know, I'm having trouble figuring out this complex algorithm, or I'm having a hard time saying complex algorithm. I'm having trouble getting the server ops people to respond to me. These are the kinds of things that those other passive members in the team and your Scrum Master can help with, right? They can help you get through these things. And they want to. They really, really want to. That's why they're there. 15 minutes and 15 minutes only. If you are not done in 15 minutes, stop anyway. Yeah, you'll only have to do that once or twice because people will get faster, right? So stop anyway, even if you're not done with everyone, because the people that you didn't get to will get ticked off that they didn't get to say their piece, and they will make sure that you go faster next time. And you as a project manager, Scrum Master, leader of any type, won't have to force people to move faster. They will just move faster because they want to get through it. And the output here is not status, coordination, right? This is the time for team members to talk to each other to make sure that, hey, I'm working in this part of the code. Are you working in that part of the code? Hey, when I'm done with this piece of the code, I'll hand it to you so you can finish writing up the script that you've got into it before we send it off to have it peer reviewed or code reviewed and then tested or whatever. This is where all that happens. The coordination. Sprint retrospective, the sprint retrospective, sorry. The retrospective is where you inspect and adapt. Who's supposed to be there? The whole Scrum team. The product owners might be there, but it's not necessary. I've seen it work well both ways, and that really depends on your relationship with your product owner. It is for the team to improve their delivery process. It's not, again, for peer review, like a 360 review or personal reviews or personnel reviews. It's time to Kaizen, right? Small, incrementally improve. So we identify little improvements that we can add, that we can use to improve the organization. It happens after the product's demo, but before you start planning, right? Because the output of a retrospective is actual tasks that actually go into your backlog for the next sprint so that you can actually work on actually doing the improvements that you said you were going to do. And I said it before, if you've been on these webinars, the retrospective items need to be like retirement planning. Take them out of your paycheck first. They need to go on the very top of your Scrum board and be the things that are attacked the very first before you do anything else, because if you don't, you'll never get to them. Just like retirement planning, if you do retirement investment with the money left over at the end of the month, there's no money left over at the end of the month. It just, it goes away, right? So you have to pay yourself first. This is your pay yourself first of software development. The sprint demo, very important thing to do. People have worked their butts off for the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They deserve some credit. Who? Oh, well, I said just the Scrum team. It's the Scrum team. It's the product owners. It is hopefully customers if you can get them to attend. What you do there, you demonstrate the work that was completed. The reason I said who there was just the Scrum team was that Scrum team are the ones that actually do the demo. So don't have a project manager, PGM kind of program manager person do the demo. Don't have somebody else do the demo. The person that worked on that module or that piece of code should be doing that demo. If people work together, they should maybe sit together and one of them demos it. Sometimes I've seen it work where the testers do the demo because the devs didn't want to do the demo. They didn't like talking in front of groups, so they let the testers do the demo. But they sat next to them, because at the end of each demonstration of each piece of functionality, the demo of each story, you celebrate. You clap for them. You say, nice job. That was really cool. I love the way that worked. Because these people worked hard for 2 weeks to get this work done. So celebrate the work that they did. It should be on the last day of the sprint. And it should, here, demonstrate what was completed. I didn't go into that. Only things that were completed according to your team's definition of done. The definition of done? What's that? When you're doing Scrum, when you're doing anything, you need to define what done means. How do you know if you're done if you haven't defined what done means? Does done, so often when I'm starting with a team and they haven't defined done, I walk into the organization right there. We do Scrum. And, okay, where's your definition of done? We don't have one. Okay. How so now we go into planning with them. Well, this, and you do, they're estimating the work. Or how big is this story or something? And inevitably, a dev person will say, this takes, this is going to take 10 days to do or 5 days to do, right? And if you're estimating ideal days, or it's an 8-point story or 5-point story. And if there is no definition of done, how do you know? How do you know it's going to take that much work or it is that big in points? Because it may actually be that it can be coded, type, done typing, in 3 days, but then it has to be tested, and then it has to be integrated and regression tested, and then the bugs have to be fixed, and then it has to be promoted through 3 different environments, and then it has to be UAT tested. Ew, yeah, all of that needs to be done. That's what done means, folks. And only stories who have been done all the way through, and that's, I've made up a definition of done. Your definition of done may be that it is coded and QA'd or is coded and built, right? That's kind of a weak definition of done, and I wouldn't recommend it because when it comes time to go live, you're going to have some kind of integration sprint or something because you didn't push your definition far enough. But whatever your definition of done is what you need to work towards and what you need to estimate towards and what you need to demo, only things that meet your criteria of this is what we as a team said done is. And your product owner is going to have some say in that usually, in parts of it, right? They want to make sure that it's in XYZ environment so that it's ready to push to production or something like that usually. So that's important. This should not be a surprise meeting. In other words, if you have a good organizational structure, and this gets to your question earlier, Yavor, about the customer being, or I'm thinking you mean product owner, being unwilling to participate. If your product owner isn't participating, then this is a surprise meeting. Ta-da! This is what we made. We guessed at what you thought you wanted. It shouldn't be that way. They should be constantly, daily interacting with the product owner, the development, QA, everybody interacting with the product owner so that they know exactly what is being created. The product owner is actually going to be doing acceptance of individual stories as you go through the sprint. And then they do overall acceptance of the sprint at the sprint demo. Really, it's a big celebration of the work that was done. Okay. All right. Look at that. We have 10 minutes left and time for questions. So that's kind of the high level. These are the Scrum events that happen, and the way that I teach them when I'm teaching organizations how to do it. Love to hear your thoughts. Is this the way it runs where you're at? Is it working well? Are you doing something different that works well? Because I'd love to learn that. How are things where you are? Please feel free to type your questions into the questions section. I don't think anybody's in chat. No, you're in the question section here. Do. Any questions? No? You've been asking them as we went along? That's awesome. Do we need to involve stakeholders for a done meeting? You mean in defining the definition of done? I would. I mean, I would at least let them know what my definition of done is, because they may say, "Ooh, yeah, I'd rather." I mean, you may set the bar at we're going to have it in the not the staging environment, and they really want it, or in a pre-prod environment, and they want it in a staging environment, which is one further than their pre-prod or something like that, because they'd really like it to be. Some organizations say, well, what we would like to do the demo and then push the button that makes it go. How can you get on their calendars? It's very difficult. Yes, it is, and that's part of the cultural change that needs to happen when you're working to become an agile organization. It is not easy. I've worked with clients for exactly, yeah. I've worked with clients for multiple years to slowly get to a place where now we're finally converting the organization as a whole to using Scrum, right? But it took us years to get there because they wanted it to be very organic, and that has worked phenomenally well. I have worked in organizations where Scrum was pushed on the organization, and it has not worked as well, right? It has been very difficult in those situations because people resist being forced into change. But in some organizations, if you do it more organically, people see the successes of Agile and go, wow, we really should do this. If you go onto the whitewaterprojects.com website and look at my blog, I updated my website, by the way. If you haven't been there recently, check it out. It's all updated and fresh. If you go into the blog, and the last blog post was from the Digital Government Conference where I spoke last week, and you can look at that. It's interesting, but more interesting is the case study that's there, and that is for one of these organizations that has slowly gone there. And what happened was they had huge success, like this is in this case study, and then people within the organization went, dang, not only did they get done in 9 months what was planned in a waterfall approach to take 2 years, no joke, they actually had fun doing it, right? Because they could hear them laughing and doing all kind of fun stuff. So definitely take a look at that case study. Am I going to share the PowerPoint? Yeah, actually I'm going to do it on SlideShare, and I will put it up there. and save that. So yeah, I will put it up there. I'm also going to put the recording onto the blog. So I'm going to start doing that from now on. So that's where I'm at right now. Very cool. Whoa, all of a sudden because I have to go pick up my daughter. So folks, I appreciate you all coming. If you have any other questions, reach out to me. That's great. I love it. I want to share one last thing with you before you go, though. I have stopped teaching public classes, at least public multi-day classes, and that's for a number of reasons, not the least of which is this. People tend to come to those classes in order to learn something that they can use, right? I mean, you want to learn stuff you can use, especially if you're going to make a big investment of a couple, 2, 3 days, right? And I'm here to tell you that it's very, very, very hard to do that way. Think about this. My daughter plays volleyball, the one I'm going to go pick up. Plays volleyball. Imagine 2 teams. One team, you give a 2-day class and a book on volleyball. The other team, you give a 2-day class, a book on volleyball, and set them up with a coach who practices with them every day, runs them through drills every day, and goes to the game with them and coaches them during the game. Imagine these 2 teams. Who's going to win? Who's going to win that game? Even more than who's going to win, which team would you want to play on? Who's going to have more fun? Definitely the one with the coach. I'm not so I'm stopping giving classes because I don't think it's appropriate. I will give classes for private classes for organizations. If you call me in, I'd love to come work with you. As long as we agree to at least 2 follow-up sessions, can just be a conference call or something like that, where we talk through what's going on and how you're implementing, what are the bumps that you've gotten in the road on the way here, because these are the things that you won't think of in class, right? That when real life happens and the swarms of gnats come picking at you and drag you back to the old way, right? You need someone to help guide you back to what you were trying to get to, what the new places you're trying to go, and it's just too hard to do by yourself without the volleyball coach, right? So that's why I've stopped giving public classes. I'm going to do one. I think I'll do one in London here in a few months, and if it winds up being a 2-day class, which would be great, what I'm going to do is arrange with coaches in London, not me, them, to attend the class. They'll attend for free, and they'll help facilitate some of the exercises, and they will do the follow-up locally with people, because I believe so strongly that it's a waste of your money to go taking classes with people and then not getting follow-up with them. So that's it. I love doing this. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk with you again next month. Thanks. Bye-bye.